Bantersnatch.
This is the Bantersnatch.
Awesome. Candace.
Good evening, Internet. This is Dalek 6, and you're listening to the Holocaust Bantersnatch. Joining me this evening is Stuart from the Monday Movie Show.
Hello.
And there he is. Stuart, before we get things properly underway, what is your favourite movie if you're like in a desert island situation and you can only take one with you?
Stand By Me.
Really?
Yeah, it's the only film that I deem perfect. I never see it that a movie is perfect. Even though I absolutely adore the film, I'll never see it's perfect. So, like, for instance, the Lord of the Rings trilogy or things like that. The only film that I can sit down and watch time and time and time again is Stand By Me.
Interesting choice. Good one, too. I've heard people say that Castle of Cagliostro by Ghibli is the perfect movie as well. Personally, my favourite movies are Casablanca, The Usual Suspects, and Farewell My Concubine. If I had to take one with me, it would definitely be Casablanca because it's the only happy movie.
Yeah.
If I ended up watching Farewell My Concubine over and over for the rest of eternity, then I would either end up killing myself from depression or gay for Tony Leung. Now then, Halloween is coming, and we know what that means, don't we, Stuart?
Too many trick-or-treaters knocking on your door, bothering you every second.
I was actually thinking in movie terms.
Oh, that as well.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about 3 topics today, 2 of them related to the mainstream crap, which we're inevitably going to have to put up with, and 1 not so mainstream. And the first thing I want to talk about is found footage movies. Now, what's your opinion on these?
There is way too many of them, and you can probably blame Paranormal Activity for that. Because you've got the found footage films that people know about, the Blair Witch Project, which you might as well see it reignited the genre, because it did begin with Cannibal Holocaust in a way, because it is got a found footage kind of feel to it. But the one to kickstart all of that off is the Blair Witch Project. And then once Paranormal Activity came out, then you just got a deluge of them, and there are too many of them. It's a genre that doesn't bring anything new to the table.
I think you're right in that. It's one of those genres, isn't it, where each movie's got one trick and you can't do that again.
Yeah.
You were saying about Cabin in the Woods. It's an incredible film, but nobody's going to be able to do it after that. And you know they're going to.
Yeah, definitely. Because the Cabin in the Woods kind of thing has been done a million times before. But like you said, with the Cabin in the Woods, they tried something different. And it's that thing where a movie like that has only once in like 10 years. You'll have to wait like another 10 years before you get that kind of movie which reignites a genre, because that's what the horror genre needed. It needed to go kick up the arse, and it hasn't had that for quite a while. And Cabin in the Woods did that, and the found footage genre, I don't know what can be done with it. So I'm going to review a film called Apartment 143, and because the way found footage films go on, they always seem to take their time, they build up, and then you get the payoff in the last half an hour. Well, with Apartment 143, it just went, screw it, and we'll start at it from the start, and that's it. It's going to all happen. And that's been the best found footage film I've seen in a while.
Right. My favourite is definitely Cannibal Holocaust. That is a movie that is so good that I have described Cannibal Holocaust. I have synopsised it for people who have no interest in horror films at all, and have actually said to me, wow, that actually sounds really interesting. I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
One that I think deserves plaudits for trying something different is actually what I consider to be the worst found footage film in existence. Can you imagine the one I'm talking about?
Oh, there's too many. The worst one I've seen is Your Devil Inside. That's god awful.
I wouldn't actually class that as a found footage movie. I was thinking more about the space one. Is it Apollo 13?
Apollo 18.
The one where they go to the moon and it's made of spiders.
Yeah.
There's just so much wrong with it, and that, like the fact that they can run in space. I could devote a whole Bantersnatch to how bad that film is.
Yeah, it's executive produced by Timur Bekmambetov as well, and he's after doing Wanted, he hasn't a clue what the hell they're doing, so he thought, let's do executive production on film so people don't know what I'm doing, and he did that movie, and I saw it at the cinema, and I remember people's reactions coming out of it was like, what the hell did we watch?
Yeah. Do you rate the Wreck films at all?
I love the Wreck films, apart from the third one, because I like the idea of what they did with it. They ditched the found footage stuff after the first 20 minutes, and I liked that idea, but it just didn't work for the film series itself, and I loved Wreck 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm. I'm not a fan personally. It's weird because all my friends have the same kind of horror film taste to me, and they all went gaga over it, and I just couldn't see it personally.
This is the Bantersnatch.
Right, moving on. Another staple that we're seeing a lot of at the moment, exorcism movies. Now, I'm personally not a fan of the original Exorcist. I think it was obviously very hard-hitting at the time, but I think that if you re-watch it, it doesn't really have any value beyond being transgressive.
You're one of the only people who I actually agree with. For instance, Mark Kermode, a brilliant movie critic, he rates that as his favourite film of all time, but I can't see it. The film, I understand what it brings to the genre, but I can't see why people go gaga over it. It is an okay film, but it's nothing very special. And exorcism movies, they're boring.
I actually have a bit of a soft spot for the genre, for the reason that on the one hand they are quite safe entertainment movies. When you rent an exorcism movie for the evening, you know exactly what you're in for. You're in for creepy preachers, you're in for a woman strapped to a bed. So on the one hand, it's a very, very popcorn movie genre. But on the other hand, it is still a genre where you could conceivably get some original scares, where you could see something that makes you go, whoa, what the hell was that? And there's a lot of moments in the Devil Inside trailer that tick those boxes for me, like when the woman's limbs snap backwards, and I thought, wow, I've never seen that before, I want to see that film. And unfortunately, it was one of those, all of the good bits are in the trailer films.
Yeah. Worst film is one of the worst films I've seen this year, actually.
Yeah. I heard that do you know what the difference between the UK release and the American release of Devil Inside was?
No.
The difference was that, you remember the ending, the car crashes fade to black?
Yeah.
There. Right. In the American version, it actually flashed up the URL of the website on the screen, and that was the end of the movie.
Okay.
And apparently that outraged people so that people were screaming at the screen during the showings in America.
Yeah. Well, the other example, which is similar to that, is every single year you get the Paranormal Activity films. For the last 4 years they've happened, and alongside that you get this sort of like spin-off version of a Paranormal Entity. And there's a fourth one coming out this year. It's out on Monday, actually, to be specific. And they've sort of like, in a way, they've copied what Paranormal Activity did. So the first one is, again, it's in a house, and they're getting affected by what's in the house. And then after that, they decided to go a different route. And with the third one, they went with a possession kind of film, with somebody being possessed by it. And it's an absolute god-awful movie. But at the start of the movie, there was no intro at all, so there was no opening credits. And at the end of the film, there is no closing credits. If you go onto IMDb, you will see no director attached to the film at all. And there's actually no proper actors and actresses attached to the film. So it's like they're trying to say it is a found footage possession movie.
Mm-hmm. I would actually debate with you whether or not other things do try to copy what Paranormal Activity did, because Paranormal Activity is a film. The hook is that they're in the house and there is a thing. Yeah. But if you think about the plot, it's essentially a love triangle. It's a love triangle between the girl and Micah, or whatever his name is, and this thing, and they don't realise that it is about two men fighting over a girl. And Micah's actions and the entity's actions, they're all chest thumping and shows of force in an attempt to win this girl.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it an interesting film, whether you like it or not. Whereas the sequels don't actually do anything apart from they're in a house and there is a thing.
Yeah.
Do you have a favourite exorcism film?
Oh, that is a good question, because it's just a part of horror which I've never felt that it's strong enough to have a favourite in it. There are movies, like you said, where you don't mind putting them on and watching them because they're popcorn films, but they're never movies where I would say to myself, actually, that's brilliant, or I really enjoyed that. They're just nothing special at all. There isn't one which comes to mind which I deem to be like my favourite in that genre of horror.
There's a couple that I'm quite fond of. My favourite, I would say, is The Exorcist 3.
Yeah.
Just because, again, you know exactly what you're in for. It's another Exorcist film, but there are so many moments in it that just make you go, fuck, what the hell did I just see? Like the statue looming up behind the woman, and the bit with the old woman crawling across the ceiling like a spider, and the giant pair of scissors that just comes out of fucking nowhere.
Yeah.
The other one that I have a sneaking fondness, quite recent, is The Last Exorcism.
Yeah, I was going to. That's probably closer to the top of my list. The Last Exorcism. It's just the last 10 minutes let it down.
Yeah, they do. I mean, sorry for spoiling anyone, but they pull a bit of a Wicker Man ending.
Yeah.
And it doesn't quite work. But after watching it, despite how disappointed I was with the ending, I still liked it in hindsight because, again, it's like Paranormal Activity, when you go back and analyse what's actually passed in the film, it's about the characters. It's about this weird family dynamic which is existing in paranormal circumstances. And in the case of Devil Inside, it's about paternal protection specifically, because there are three main male protagonists in the film: the exorcist, the girl's mother, and the demon.
Yeah.
And the twist at the end, again, spoilers, is that she was carrying this entity in her uterus. So all three of them are sort of like either real fathers or proxy fathers. You've got the exorcist, who is trying to protect children because of a need to allay his own guilt over things he's done in the past.
Yeah.
Got the father, who is the sort of completely straightforward, out to protect his biological daughter, and the entity is trying to protect its offspring via her.
Yeah.
So even though the ending left me cold, it's one that made me look back on everything that happened in the film and thought, yeah, I see now.
And it spawned a sequel, because the sequel's out next year.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see that. Probably be shit, but you know.
Probably, yeah.
We'll try anything once, won't we?
Yep, definitely. Especially when it comes to horror.
Absolutely. Everybody didn't. Everybody pissed on Silent Hill 4. I thought it was brilliant.
This is the Bantersnatch.
Anyway, not to get into games though, the third thing I want to talk about, I'd like to hear about horror movies that you've seen, or even not horror movies, but that have a horror element to them, that have really freaked you out because it handles something that you didn't expect to be frightened by.
Yeah, well, the thing with a horror movie is, I deem a horror movie to be ultimately successful if it has actually managed to scare you. If it is that kind of film. So if it's a movie where it just concentrates more on gore, then you're not going to get much scares in the film itself. But if it's a movie where its ultimate goal is to scare you, then it's worked. The last film that managed to scare me was a French film called Il, or Them. It's a home invasion film. It's not specifically horror in context. It's not like ghosts or anything like that. But it's a French horror film where it's a couple in this huge, massive house getting terrorized by these kids. A slight little spoiler there, who because she's a teacher and these kids from her school has terrorized them. And it works so brilliantly because it doesn't rely on any. It is cliche ridden, but it doesn't. It knows what it's doing, and it follows a checklist, and it hits these bullet points perfectly. It's dark and it's tense, and you expect that kind of thing.
Yeah. What you're describing to me sounds an awful lot like the way in which John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13 is a zombie movie, but it isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Society, I think, is one worth talking about.
Definitely, because you're not expecting what happens at the end.
The ending, it's quite a tense, creepy movie.
Yeah.
But it goes from that to one of the most incredible and notorious endings in cinema history. And if you're not interested in watching the film, but you want to hear what we're talking about, do a YouTube for Society final scene. You just have to see it to believe it. You really do.
Completely agree with you on that one. It is that shocking film, because when you watch the movie, when I originally watched Society, I think it was on some like BBC Two really, really late at night when I first watched the film, and I was bored for like the first hour.
It's like you're not paying attention to it, so when the final shock arrives, it absolutely takes you sideways.
Definitely.
Another one. Do you favour Christoph Gans at all?
Yes.
Necronomicon. For those of you who don't know, Necronomicon is a Twilight Zone style trilogy of short stories in the style of movies like The Twilight Zone. And the third story is called Whispers, and it's very loosely based on Lovecraft's The Whisperer in the Darkness. Now, spoilers again. The Whisperer in the Darkness, the final shock in it is that this guy is talking to his old friend, but his old friend says he's very sick and he doesn't want him to see him like this. So for the whole story, he's talking to him from behind a curtain, and he can only hear his voice. And at the end of the story, he opens the curtain and the guy is a brain in a jar.
Yeah.
Which, in Lovecraft's time, would have been quite shocking. But, nowadays you see a brain in a jar, you think Futurama.
Yeah.
What Christoph Gans did with The Whisperer in the Darkness, he just made it more fucked up in more ways than you can possibly imagine. They take the Migo, the fungi from Yoggoth, which was a poem by Lovecraft that he wrote about a nightmare that he had while he was in school. And instead of taking people's brains out and putting them in a jar, they put them inside their own uterus, and the brain is then devoured by their own young, fully conscious and able to cry out for help. And it sounds like the most stupid, campy idea, but after watching it, it came out of nowhere so much that I just thought, Christ, that's like somebody filmed my worst nightmare and made me pay to watch it.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I was so excited when he was announced to do the Silent Hill movie. He's not doing the sequel, though, is he?
No, he's not. But can you imagine if there is another film, which the only other film in a while that's actually quite shocked me was the film Inside, the French film Inside, by Alexandre Bastillo and Julien Mourier. And it's one of those films where if you're there with your wife or girlfriend who is expecting, they're really going to hate you for showing it, because there is a scene in the movie where she cuts open her stomach to take out the baby, and you're expecting, you're not going to see that, are you? You're not going to see the scissors go into the belly button and cut up the stomach and then pull the baby out. But you see absolutely everything, and the amount of gore in that movie, I was just shocked that they were able to get away with releasing that movie uncut.
Mm-hmm. Now, another one I'd like to mention is, have you ever heard of Uzumaki?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
It's a horror comic by a guy called Ito, who's got a fucking screw loose. Seriously, it's a very it's 4 books in length, so it's like a proper Clive Barker epic.
Yeah.
And I won't go into the meta story behind what is happening, but there's this town and everything is going spiral shaped.
Uh-huh.
And it's one of those films where it's just scary because it is. There's no way you could sit down and think, okay, what's scary? Spirals. People going spiral is scary. And people are just curling up into spirals. And it's not just people, it's like patterns in the air, patterns on the ground, everything is going spiral shape. And there's not really even any implication that there's any evil going on here, that there's any malice, any attempt to cause harm. Everything is just going spiral.
Yeah.
But in terms of body horror, that's a profoundly awful thing.
Yeah.
People are just like you curling up into spirals and you can hear their bones cracking. And it's just horrendous. They made a movie of it. The movie is awful. Absolutely one of the worst pieces of bargain basement acting I've ever seen. But even through the shitty production values, it is decent body horror, low budget body horror, just because of what is happening. I'd highly recommend anyone watch the book, and certainly, but if it creeps them out, then take a look at don't torrent the film, obviously, because we don't recommend things like that. But find some way of watching it, shall we say, because it's just. Again, it's the Killer 7 argument, as Yahtzee would put it. You've got to see it because you'll never see anything else like it.
Yeah.
Is there anything that deals with elements of horror, but doesn't set out to be horror, that you recall as really freaking you out? I mean, I think Doctor Who excels at this sometime because it has not really a remit as a kids show.
Yeah.
But it has to be family friendly, so they can't show anything too explicit. And so because of that, they have to come up with stuff like The Weeping Angels, where there's actually no gore, but it's the idea that scares you. I remember being scared to death of the Verboids when I was a kid. But is there anything you can think of like that scares you out of a place that isn't actually horror?
That is a good question. As a kid, the thing that used to scare me a lot was the TV series Nightmare.
Oh my God, the catacomb bite.
Yeah, it was just when they had the spyglass up against the eye shield, and when there was listening into the conversation, and then when the bad guy realised they were listening in on the conversation, and then there was a fireball getting sent their way or something like that. Watching that as a kid, you think to yourself, didn't get away with showing that on TV at this time of day? Or just things like when you watch Are You Afraid of the Dark? What used to be shown on Nickelodeon. Or even things like Ren and Stimpy. Cartoons like that, you think to yourself, they're getting away with that? The violence and stuff like that in those kind of cartoons, they're getting away with that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Nightmare was one of those shows that irritated me immensely, but I still couldn't stop watching it. Because the fact that they had to run away from things, but they couldn't see where they were going, it was sort of like one of those nightmares where you're trying to run away, but you can't.
Yeah.
And one that I rate quite highly. Have you ever watched Full Metal Alchemist?
I love Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, that is another show. Let's get this straight. It's not a family show. It's not for kids. It starts off with two children basically being dismembered.
Yeah.
And the show gets more unhappy from there.
Yeah.
Again, no gore, because it had to be put out at prime time. But Full Metal Alchemist has a lot of elements like the start of the show, which I just mentioned, the fact that he has metal limbs that he can transmute, the fact that one of the secondary villains in it is a cannibal. It plays all the time with body horror.
Yeah.
I think my favourite episode of Full Metal Alchemist is The Night the Chimera Cried.
Uh-huh.
You remember that one?
Yes.
Yeah. And there's just a bit at the end where the guys created the Chimera, and this dog thing walks up to Edward with these awful dead eyes. And Edward looks up at the guy and says, "Where's your dog?" And then the dog looks up at Edward and says in a human voice, "Big brother, play with me, play with me." And he says, "And where's your daughter?" I was like, Christ, really? That really freaked the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've reached the end of my running order here.
There is just one thing I need to add to the found footage one. There's a film coming out called VHS, which I've seen, and it's one of these movies which is trying their best to do something different with the found footage film, because it's one of those ones where it's like an anthology. There's like 5 different stories in it. Mm-hmm. But it is the first time that I've seen a found footage film where it's trying to attempt to do something different, and for the most part it does work with some of the stories in it, because some of the stories in it are really freaky. So people should keep an eye out for VHS.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, that's a good recommendation. I'll knock one back at you. I keep meaning to ask you if you are into Marble Hornets yet.
I've watched the first 2 episodes on your suggestion, but I keep on forgetting to watch the rest.
Mm-hmm. It's a great. I'm very surprised that at 5 minutes per episode, it's lasted 50 episodes now, I think.
Yeah.
But it's done it because it gets criticised because every episode is expected to be a game changer episode, and every episode kind of is, but keeping things the same at the same time. But it survived because they turn things around every series. The first series is to do with building up the Slender Man as the big bad.
Yeah.
Then the second series, it starts to imply that the human characters that are involved are actually more twisted and more potentially dangerous than anything supernatural that the show is throwing at you. And then the third season, they've really started to explore how these human characters relate to each other and what they are feeling when they are on screen, being basically movie monsters. And I think it's got I would say that's got at least 2 more seasons in it.
Yeah.
Before it starts getting seriously tedious. So, yeah, big recommendation for that.
Yep.
Right. Thanks very much for coming on this show, Stuart.
Not a problem.
You've been listening to the Holocaust Bantersnatch. I'm Dalek Sex. He's Stuart. Say goodbye, Stuart.
Bye, Stuart.
And I'll see you next time.
Bantersnatch.
This is the Bantersnatch.
Awesome. Candace.